In 1885, a psychiatric asylum opened in Northern Michigan where patients ate dinner on fine china, straitjackets were forbidden, and fresh flowers decorated every ward. 40 years later, the same institution had administered over 30,000 electroshock treatments. This is the story of what happened inside the walls of Traverse City State Hospital. In the 1880s, Michigan had a problem. Its two existing psychiatric hospitals in Kalamazoo and Pontiac were overflowing. Patients were being turned away. Families were hiding mentally ill relatives in basements and attics because there was simply nowhere else to send them. The state needed a third facility. One man was determined to make sure it ended up in his town. Perry Hanna was a lumber baron. They called him the father of Traverse City. He had built his fortune stripping the white pine forests of northern Michigan, and he could see the industry dying. The sawmills that had given his town a reason to exist were running out of trees. So Perry Hanna did what powerful men do when they sense a crisis. He looked for the next opportunity, and he found it in madness. Hanna lobbied relentlessly for the new asylum. He traveled to the state capital in Lansing to make his case, a journey that in those days could take weeks on foot through dense wilderness. He hired Native American guides. He walked when others took the train. His persistence paid off. In 1881, the state of Michigan approved the construction of the Northern Michigan Asylum in Traverse City. Perry Hanna had saved his town, but what he built would outlast him in ways nobody predicted. The man chosen to run this new institution was a young physician named James Decker Munson, and Munson had ideas that were, for the time, nothing short of radical. Most asylums in the late 19th century operated on a simple principle: contain the patient, lock the door, forget about them. Munson rejected that entirely. He believed in something he called beauty is therapy. The idea was almost absurdly simple. If you surrounded disturbed minds with beautiful things, with natural light and open air and the dignity of a normal life, the mind might begin to heal itself. It sounds obvious now. In 1885, it was revolutionary. The building that would become the centerpiece of this philosophy was called Building 50. Designed by Detroit architect Gordon Lloyd, according to the Kirkbride plan, it stretched nearly a quarter-mile long and stood 4 stories tall. Over 8 million bricks were sourced from a local brickyard in nearby Greilickville, giving the structure a warm, yellowish tone that glowed in the northern Michigan sunlight. Every patient room had a large window, not a barred window, an actual window designed to let in light and fresh air. The corridors were wide enough for patients to move freely without feeling confined. Ventilation spires pulled fresh air through the wards. The women lived in the north wing, the men in the south, and in the grand center section, the administration offices overlooked the sprawling grounds like a watchtower over a small kingdom. But Munson's vision extended far beyond architecture. Under his leadership, the asylum became something that had never existed before in American psychiatric care. It became a community. Patients ate their meals in dining rooms set with white linen tablecloths, formal china glazed with the state seal, and vases of freshly cut flowers grown in the asylum's own greenhouses. Restraints were strictly forbidden. If a patient became agitated, they were calmed through conversation, not chains. Munson planted hundreds of trees across the grounds, creating walking trails and gardens where patients could spend their days outdoors. The roads on campus were named by color: Red Road, Yellow Drive, Silver Avenue, because colors were easier for patients to remember than street names. Even that small detail reveals how deeply Munson thought about the people in his care. And then there was the farm. Starting with a few dairy cows in 1885, the asylum farm grew into a sprawling agricultural operation covering over 1,000 acres. Patients raised pigs, chickens, and cattle. They grew vegetables, they canned fruit, they built furniture in the carpentry shop, and tended citrus trees in the greenhouse during the brutal Michigan winters. This was what Munson called work is therapy. The idea that purpose and routine could do more for a broken mind than any medicine available at the time. The farm even produced a minor celebrity. A Holstein cow named Travis Calantha Walker became the highest milk producer in the world during the 1920s. She has a headstone on the asylum grounds to this day, a grave marker for a cow on the campus of a psychiatric hospital. It is one of the strangest and most strangely human details in the entire history of American asylums. The institution also had its own baseball team that played against local high school squads. There was a band, a chapel that doubled as a movie theater, and in 1908, a nurse named Jenny Lease convinced Munson to let her start a nursing training program at the asylum, one of the first of its kind in the country. 24 women graduated in that first class. For nearly 4 decades, the Northern Michigan Asylum was proof that kindness could be a form of treatment. But here is where the story turns, because the very success of Munson's vision planted the seeds of its destruction. Word spread that Traverse City treated its patients well. Families across 39 Michigan counties, stretching all the way to the Upper Peninsula, began sending their relatives there. The hospital that opened with 43 patients was soon housing hundreds, then thousands. By 1959, nearly 3,000 people were packed into a facility that had never been designed for that kind of volume. The original philosophy depended on space, on sunlight, on personal attention. Overcrowding destroyed all three. And it was not just the mentally ill who ended up behind those walls. The hospital expanded its mission during outbreaks of tuberculosis, typhoid, diphtheria, influenza, and polio, becoming a catch-all institution for anyone the outside world could not handle. People were admitted for epilepsy, for addiction, for what was then called hysteria. The records list admissions for conditions that would never warrant institutionalization today, including business reversal, religious excitement, and nostalgia. Nostalgia appears in the hospital records. A person could be committed to Traverse City State Hospital because they were homesick, and once you were inside, getting out was another matter entirely. Some patients spent decades in the institution without ever receiving a formal diagnosis. When Munson retired in 1924, the philosophy he had spent 4 decades building began to erode. The new generation of administrators faced impossible math. More patients, the same buildings, fewer resources, and a new wave of psychiatric thinking was sweeping the country, one that promised faster results through more aggressive intervention. By the 1940s, the beauty that had once defined Traverse City was being systematically dismantled. Insulin shock therapy became standard practice. Patients were injected with massive doses of insulin to induce comas, sometimes lasting hours, in the belief that the brain would somehow reset itself upon waking. Electroshock therapy followed. By the late 1940s, the hospital had administered over 30,000 electroshock treatments. And then came the lobotomies. The violence of these treatments produced exactly what you would expect, a more combative patient population. The wall hangings that Munson had so carefully selected were torn down. The houseplants were destroyed. The small tables and furnishings that had made the wards feel like homes were smashed. The words of encouragement that Munson had painted on the walls, gentle reminders meant to comfort troubled minds, were covered over with layers of lead paint. It was as if the institution itself was trying to erase the memory of what it had once been. But Traverse City still had one more surprise left. And it arrived in the form of a man who should never have been allowed to practice medicine at all. In 1954, a doctor named John Ferguson was assigned to the asylum. Ferguson was famous in psychiatric circles for one thing. He could perform a lobotomy in 3 minutes. He had been sent to Traverse City to perform the procedure on 500 patients. That was his assignment. 500 lobotomies. But Ferguson never performed a single one. What makes this even more remarkable is Ferguson's own history. He had been a barbiturate addict. He had been institutionalized himself 5 separate times over 22 years for psychotic breakdowns. He was not a psychiatrist, he was a general practitioner. And yet something about arriving at Traverse City, seeing what remained of Munson's original vision, changed his mind entirely. Instead of cutting into brains, Ferguson began experimenting with chemical treatments. He used thorazine, which had just become available, along with Ritalin and carefully measured doses of insulin. He called his approach tender, loving care. He believed that seclusion rooms and straitjackets were unnecessary if you could find the right combination of medication. Many in the medical establishment thought he was a fraud, a former addict with no psychiatric credentials running drug experiments on vulnerable patients. But the patients themselves reportedly responded to him. One former staff member described Ferguson as a jolly old Saint Nick type. The patients loved him. Whether Ferguson was a visionary or a reckless experimenter is still debated. But one thing is certain. His arrival at Traverse City marked the beginning of the end for the old way of doing things. Because the drugs worked. Not perfectly, not for everyone, but well enough that the massive warehousing of human beings in sprawling asylum complexes suddenly seemed unnecessary. And that is exactly what happened next. Through the 1950s and 1960s, the national mood shifted. Community-based care became the new philosophy. The sprawling state hospitals that had defined American psychiatry for a century were suddenly seen as relics. At Traverse City, the farm closed in the 1950s. Most of its buildings were demolished in the 1970s. In 1963, the original center wing of Building 50, the architectural heart of Munson's vision, was torn down because of fire code violations, and it was replaced with a flat-roofed modern structure that had none of the original building's warmth. By February of 1988, only 140 patients remained. 250 staff members were still employed to care for them. The state announced the hospital would close, and in 1989, after 104 years of continuous operation, the Traverse City State Hospital shut its doors for good. What happened next is the part of this story that stays with you. Many of the remaining patients were transferred to group homes or released to family members, but a significant number had neither. They had no families, no savings, no experience navigating a world they had not seen in years, sometimes decades. Some ended up homeless, some ended up in the prison system. According to people who lived on the west side of Traverse City during those years, for 2 years after the hospital closed, former patients would walk back to the abandoned campus and knock on the doors. Nobody answered. The building that had been their entire world for most of their lives was empty. The lights were off. The wards were dark. And the people who had once been told that beauty could heal them were left standing in the cold of a northern Michigan winter with nowhere else to go. The asylum sat abandoned for over a decade. The buildings decayed, windows shattered, paint peeled from the walls of wards where patients had once dined on fine china. Urban explorers broke in and documented the ruins. Ghost stories multiplied. Visitors reported hearing voices in the empty corridors, seeing unexplained lights flickering in buildings with no working electricity, feeling an oppressive weight in the abandoned laundry rooms and treatment wards. The grounds became known as one of the most haunted places in Michigan. There was even a legend about a tree. Patients had once been allowed to walk the trails behind Building 50 as far as a large oak tree with a picnic table beneath it. They called it the hippie tree. Below the tree ran the steam tunnels that connected the hospital buildings, and patients could sometimes hear voices rising up through the ground. Some believed the tree was a portal to hell. Today, a different tree, split by lightning and covered in layers of bright paint, holds that name on the trail system behind the campus. Then, in the year 2000, a retired contractor named Ray Minervini moved to Traverse City, expecting a quiet lakeside retirement. Instead, a local preservation advocate named Carol Hale convinced him to join the effort to save the old asylum from demolition. Minervini and his development group purchased the entire property for $1. $1 for a quarter-mile-long Victorian asylum, dozens of cottages, a powerhouse, farm buildings, and over 100 acres of grounds. What followed was one of the largest historic adaptive reuse projects in the United States. Minervini poured over $60 million into restoring Building 50 and its surrounding structures. The buff-colored brick was cleaned. The Victorian towers were preserved. The long corridors that had once echoed with the footsteps of nearly 3,000 patients were fitted with new lighting, new wiring, and new purposes. Today, the former Traverse City State Hospital is called the Village at Grand Traverse Commons. It contains luxury condominiums, upscale restaurants, wine bars, boutique shops, professional offices, and a weekly farmers market held in the same hallways where patients once shuffled between wards. You can buy a bottle of wine in the basement of Building 50. You can eat pasta in a space that was once a treatment ward. You can live in an apartment where someone may have once undergone electroshock therapy and stare out the same tall windows that Gordon Lloyd designed in 1882 to let sunlight heal what medicine could not. A few of the original cottages still stand unrenovated at the edges of the property, their windows broken, their paint peeling, their interiors visible through gaps in the boards. They are the last physical reminders of what this place actually was before it became a destination for brunch. The Traverse City State Hospital served over 50,000 patients across its lifetime. It began with an idea so simple it was radical: that beauty could heal, that kindness was treatment, that a person struggling with mental illness deserved flowers on their table and sunlight through their window. And for a time, that idea worked. Then the world changed, the patients kept coming, and the institution that had tried harder than almost any other in American history to be humane slowly became something else entirely. The building is still beautiful, the grounds are still peaceful. The trees that James Decker Munson planted over a century ago still shade the walking trails. But the people who once walked those trails, the ones who knocked on the doors after everyone else had left, they are gone. And no amount of renovation can bring them back. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and like the video so more people can find ward files. In the comments, tell me which abandoned asylum is closest to where you live. We may investigate it next.